Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's Sickle Cell Sunday, I'm going to be discussing blood transfusions and how blood transfusions help sickle cell patients and my experience with blood transfusions. Just yesterday I had a blood transfusion, so that's why I kind of wanted to discuss the topic of blood transfusions, just since it's kind of still fresh from yesterday and I can discuss a little bit about it. So essentially what had started me needing a blood transfusion was around Monday, January the 11th. I had messaged my doctor that I wasn't feeling too well. I messaged her that I wasn't feeling too well. I was having still a lot of pain. I was feeling very fatigued and stuff like that. So she ordered some labs for me, and by labs I mean blood work. So I went ahead and did my blood work that I needed, but she did notice that my hemoglobin was borderline low. So basically what that means is that in my case, I'm used to having my hemoglobin around anything above an 8, and usually on my healthier days I'm around an 8.9 in the higher percentile of the 8. My hemoglobin came back as 7.8 or 7.9, in that range. My doctor called me up and she asked me, what were my symptoms and what was I feeling and stuff like that. So we had our conversation, and so she asked me if I needed a blood transfusion. Usually, I try not to do as many blood transfusions because it could cause iron overload and so many problems could arise from having so many blood transfusions. But while discussing this with her, we came to the conclusion that, the best thing for me at this point was to go ahead and do the blood transfusion. That my hemoglobin could indeed keep on dropping, and, it could cause some serious sickle cell complications. And so, that's why we went ahead and did a blood transfusion. So I did take some pictures and I posted some pictures on Snapchat, and if you're following me on Snapchat, you may have seen some of those pictures. I will try to go ahead and insert any pictures that I have from that day, but some of them did get deleted because they were on Snapchat and I totally forgot to save them. So I'll insert as many pictures as I can so you guys can kind of see what it's like to go through a blood transfusion. A blood transfusion is basically where you receive someone else's blood and you are given the blood through an IV. So the nurse will find a good vein and insert an IV, and then you will have a tubing connected to the IV supplying that blood into your veins. So it kind of works like that. Like I was mentioning, the way a blood transfusion works is that the donor, a person will donate their blood, and then that blood will be carefully screened for any diseases or anything irregular that shouldn't be in that blood. So that donated blood will then go to a patient, in this case the patient being me, and then I receive that healthy blood. But before the blood transfusion is received, you do some lab work, and the lab work will help determine what kind of blood you will need. So the lab needs to know what blood type you are. So they'll look at what blood type you are, and for example, I'm O negative, so they'll go ahead and look for someone else who is O negative. They basically want to make sure the blood really and closely matches your own. And like I mentioned before, the blood transfusion is then transfused into the arm through the vein over a period of a couple of hours. I've had mine maybe 2 or 3 hours, so it's not a long procedure, but it's not relatively short either, like 5-10 minutes. It's a couple of hours. So the blood transfusion can help sickle cell patients treat any complications that they are encountering. It could also lower the risk of strokes in younger children and infants. So like I was saying, is that the blood transfusion helps with lowering the hemoglobin S in sickle cell patients. So it lowers the amount of the hemoglobin S red blood cells in the sickle cell patient's body. When there are fewer hemoglobin S red blood cells in the body of a sickle cell patient, this can lower the risks of crisis. When there are less hemoglobin S red blood cells in the body, they are less likely to build up and block blood vessels. Also, the blood transfusion helps in increasing the number of normal red blood cells in the body, as well as increasing the supply of oxygen to the body. So the blood transfusion will kind of help reduce the number of sickle cells in the patient's body, or a sickle cell patient's body, and will also kind of create more oxygen and more red blood cells. Also, like, there are positives, there are negatives and risks with receiving a blood transfusion. So some of the risks associated with receiving a blood transfusion are iron overload. When I was a child and when I was in my teen years, I was getting frequent transfusions and I had high iron levels. So because you are receiving these transfusions, you are getting that iron that is included in that blood. So your body can really overload on iron. Having an iron overload is a very dangerous thing and could lead to hemochromatosis. And the hemochromatosis can be fatal if left untreated. So when I was having iron overloads in the past, I was taking some medication to help lower the amounts of iron in my body, which that's one of the medications that I hated to take. It was just one of the most disgusting medications I've ever tasted. And it basically is a big tablet that you melt in apple or orange juice, and the taste is just like pure chalk, and it wasn't a pleasant taste. Also, the iron is very important to have it removed because it can gather in the heart, in the liver, and in the other organs, so it can lead to organ damage. That can be a very serious complication, so it is important to make sure that your iron is well taken care of. So another risk that is associated with blood transfusions is when a person develops antibodies to the donor blood, and this process is called alloimmunization. This makes the repeated blood transfusions more difficult because then they have to find blood that is very comparable to your blood. Now they have to compare the antibodies that you have developed in your blood. Antibodies are basically proteins made by the body's natural defense system to fight foreign substances such as bacteria. When you do get a blood transfusion, the body kind of starts reacting and considers the blood transfusion a foreign substance, which it obviously is, but the blood is supposed to help you, and it starts creating these antibodies to defend itself against the blood transfusion. So that's kind of how it works. So blood transfusions can benefit sickle cell patients overall to help reduce those reoccurring pain crisis, as well as the risk of stroke and other complications that any sickle cell patient can have. Some of the complications that sickle cell patients can have are acute chest syndrome, strokes, priapism. So a blood transfusion can help with those complications that the sickle cell patient is encountering. So now that I'm done discussing a little bit of what a blood transfusion does, the risks, the benefits, and stuff like that, I'm going to discuss a little bit of how my blood transfusion went yesterday. As I was receiving my blood transfusion, I did notice that my vein was hurting, and I don't know, it wasn't like burning, or it was just a weird pain. I think what happens is sometimes the blood comes in fairly cold, so the reaction to the warm blood in our veins and then the coldness of the blood transfusion, it can kind of feel a little uncomfortable. So I was feeling a little uncomfortable. Like I said, it wasn't burning, because sometimes if the needle is in the wrong spot and you're receiving either medications or IV, it could start burning because it's not in the vein. It just felt like it was very sore. But I just, I kind of stuck through it because I did not feel like getting stuck again. Right after my blood transfusion, it kind of went smoothly. I did receive it. So right after the blood transfusion, we went and we ate some food because we were hungry. We hadn't eaten any breakfast and it was around noon already, so we were definitely getting hungry. And I did notice I started getting pain, but I didn't think too much of it because I have been having pain all week. Then once I made it home, I started feeling chills and a little feverish. I didn't have a severe fever, but I did feel those chills, and that could be a sign of, your body rejecting the transfusion. And I also noticed I was just feeling really under the weather, so I went and I laid down, I took a nap. Right after that, I took a 5-hour nap. I was so exhausted. I was so tired. I have never felt so fatigued in my life like I did after that. And it was strange for me because usually right after a blood transfusion, I do really well. Even the day after, I feel very energetic. I feel like my pain crisis have decreased, and I do feel very good. But with this transfusion, I noticed I was just very tired and very ill. I don't know, I didn't feel so good. And again, today I woke up and I was still having pains in my lower back, and I just felt like a bus kind of ran over me and my whole body was sore, and that could be a sign of your body rejecting the blood. So I was just taking it relatively easy yesterday and today, and I'm just kind of, relaxing, taking it easy again. So anyways, guys, I think that's going to be it for this week's Sickle Cell Sunday video. Please let me know if you have any further comments or questions that I can answer. Also, please leave me a comment on any sickle cell related topics that you may be interested in hearing from me. I did have a couple of comments last week on some topics, and I will be working on those videos really soon. And I'd love to hear more comments on what you guys are interested in, so I can keep on discussing my journey with you guys and maybe help some of you guys learn a little bit about sickle cell. Please remember to check my Facebook, Instagram, and Snapchat. I will leave them linked down below in the description box. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye guys!